Vampires and video games. Vampires and video games. Vampires and video games. Vampires and video games. We got the vampires. We got our video games. We got the vampires up in these video games. Over the decades, we've seen many a game put the player in the position of a vampire hunter, giving one the tools to bash bloodsuckers and destroy Draculas. In contrast, there's relatively few titles that allow gamers to put on the cape and fangs in order to terrorize humanity as a nasty Nosferatu.
When searching for modern-day vampire tales, the overlapping sections on this Venn diagram become even smaller. Other than a recent free-to-play battle royale and enough visual novels to fill a graveyard,
So many visual novels.
there's really nothing to speak of. Well, I take it back. I guess there's this. And of course, there's always...
With all that said, it's no small wonder that the subject of today's backlog quest remains a cult classic to this very day. Vampire: The Masquerade Bloodlines is a hive of vampirism and villainy set in a grimy pastiche of early 2000s Los Angeles. It's a deep and courageous combination of RPG, immersive sim, and first-person adventure. It's a game that frequently finds its way onto top 10 lists, and it's one of the most memorable games I've ever had the pleasure of fan-patching back to life. Well, today, my friends, welcome to Backlog Quest, where we aim to find out whether Bloodlines is still a fat, juicy morsel of a game, or if the passage of time has sucked out all the fun, leaving it nothing but a withered husk. My name is Boss Sauce.
And I'm Roland Coons. And together, we are the two-headed hero.
Wait. This is a modern-day vampire game, so we can't talk like Draculas.
Alright, we just had to get that out of our system. Oh yeah, that does break the Masquerade. Number one rule of the Masquerade is do not talk like Draculas.
We gotta talk like Blade.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
Before we sink our teeth into the next of this review, let's look into how this bloody chronicle came to pass. Vampire: The Masquerade Bloodlines was incepted as an indirect sequel to Vampire: The Masquerade Redemption. This precursor to Bloodlines, published by Activision and developed by Nihilistic, released way back in the far-off year of 2000.
Redemption is a flawed yet fascinating third-person action RPG set in White Wolf's pen and paper role-playing universe, the World of Darkness. This game follows the journey of Christoph Romuald, a 12th century crusader who has the misfortune of becoming a vampire's juice box. After being turned into one of Cain's children, he vows to regain his humanity and save his kidnapped lover, Aneska, who happens to be a habit-wearing member of the church.
My lord.
Yet now I suffer a new affliction, for which thou hast the only cure.
And you thought you had relationship problems.
The storyline spans Christoph's quest from the Dark Ages all the way to 1999, where he wakes up into a world of new metal, Jinko jeans, and tribal tattoos. On top of this, a powerful vampire by the name of Vukodlak has arisen. He's ghoulified Christoph's nun girlfriend and has ambitions to dominate the world. So Christoph once again resumes his crusade to regain his lost humanity and get back in the old habit.
Even though Redemption had its flaws, the game was gorgeous and had an interesting premise. It sold well enough for Activision to greenlight a sequel. Anxious to expand their reach further into the role-playing realm, Activision reached out to the team at Troika Games in 2001 and pitched an RPG using the Vampire: The Masquerade license.
Now, Troika's team was comprised of former Interplay and Black Isle veterans. Some of their devs had previously worked on iconic RPGs such as Fallout and Baldur's Gate, and Troika itself had recently launched their debut title Arcanum in August 2001 to a fair amount of critical acclaim. You can check out more on Troika's history in our Arcanum review, which we'll link right up here. Anyhow, Troika felt that the role-playing genre was stagnating, and developing an immersive 3D title in the modern gothic lore of Vampire: The Masquerade seemed to be the perfect solution.
Development on Bloodlines was problematic. Using a yet unfinished version of Valve's Source engine meant much custom code was needed to fill in the gaps. For example, the lauded enemy AI found in Half-Life 2 would not yet exist in Source during the time that Bloodlines was being developed. Scope creep ran out of control, and the team found challenges in streamlining pen and paper rules into a video game format.
Although slated for an early 2005 release, Activision put the last nail in Bloodlines' coffin when they decided to bump up the release date to November 16th, 2004, forcing Troika to release an unfinished version that only underwent a few weeks of playtesting. The game would thus suffer from crashes, glitches, and one particular bug during a final section that often left the game incompletable.
Hey, wait, that date sounds familiar. Oh yeah, probably because there was a little game called Half-Life 2 that dropped on the exact same day. And that's not all. A couple other notable games also clamored for gamer dollars right around the same time.
Who knows what Bloodlines would have looked like without pressure from Activision? Given a few more months of development time, we may have caught a better glimpse at the final form Troika intended, rather than the buggy and rushed product that flopped out onto store shelves amongst stiff competition. Sadly, dismal sales for Bloodlines spelled the end for Troika Games. While the studio was in its death rattle, some of the Troika team continued to work on fixing the game, sometimes without pay, up until the studio shuttered at the beginning of 2005.
But that's not the end of the story. Bloodlines further endures today due to the passion of the fan base, which is an extension of the effort put forth by these dedicated devs. Fan modders led by the analytical chemist Werner Spall, aka Wesp5, created the unofficial Vampire the Masquerade patch, which continues to receive further updates to this day. With the inclusion of this patch, we finally have a version of Bloodlines that's as close as it gets to the final release Troika intended.
This is the version of Bloodlines we'll be examining today, and the version we believe every RPG fan should play. If you're looking to unleash the beast yourself, you're in luck. We've made a quick and easy guide to updating Bloodlines to the latest version and unlocking all the hidden content made available in the unofficial Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines patch. You can put your claws on that link down in the description.
Oh no, you broke the masquerade. You talked like a Dracula.
Whenever you talk like Dracula or eat a jelly donut too messy, you get a demerit.
Bloodlines can be best described as a first and third person action RPG, but it also contains heavy narrative overtones throughout its 30+ hour playtime. A ton of focus is placed on character interaction and freedom of choice.
There you go, man! You're a vampire, aren't you?
The residents of Los Angeles are fleshed out and memorable rather than being
Cookie cutter quest kiosks.
"No, not again! No, my punch card!"
I just needed to hear it. For a game about vampires, Bloodlines distinctly lacks any campy Draculas. The atmosphere drips with a gritty, mature vibe, hitting the bullseye of Y2K era cool, while still being an obvious product of its time. Sort of like an unironic eyebrow ring, the edgelord factor is through the roof. But the game's clever writing regularly dips its fangs into dark comedy and provides some welcome moments of levity. It's equal parts bloody, sexy, and silly from start to finish.
What were we laughing about?
When words fail, your playable Blade Extra will spend much of their time crawling through shadows, breaking into buildings, performing petty theft, and using a variety of powers and weapons to dust lots and lots of different things, ranging from gangsters to vampires to rampaging flesh abominations and much more.
After a surprisingly deep character customization screen, where you can choose to take a master's degree in vampirism, you'll be whisked away to the first of many in-engine cutscenes and start your journey through the neon-drenched darkness of early 2000s Los Angeles.
The game sets the tone early on, opening to a hot night of passion in a grimy tenement. An evening of lust quickly goes tits up when your date bait and switches you into becoming a vampire, and you're both interrupted by a stake to the heart. But wait, you're not dead, you're undead. And shocker, stakes to the heart don't kill the undead. It just puts them in a gentle coma.
You wake up in a theater, finding yourself smack in the middle of a vampire boardroom meeting. How many times? Are you kidding me? We should have a punch card for that. Am I right? After a quick and very one-sided trial, the prince executes your sire, but decides to give you a chance at serving the Camarilla.
I think it's Camarilla.
Yeah, but I like to pronounce it Camarilla.
Okay, so when you're gonna make the pizza pie, does that count as a masquerade violation?
You get to serve the Camarilla, you're flopped out onto the street. Welcome to your unlife. Now, get to work and pay your debt off to the prince.
Prove it was more than a wasted gesture, fledgling. Don't come back until you do.
The story in Bloodlines is for the most part sharply crafted and filled with moments that stick in your head. But in my candid opinion, no one is more entertaining than Smiling Jack, an elder anarchist biker voiced by the extremely talented John DiMaggio.
No shit, that's cool.
Yeah. Your first face-to-face with this grandpa vamp serves as a tutorial to guide you through the basic mechanics as well as inform you of exactly how screwed your unlife has become.
Okay. The broad strokes. Basically, the supernatural world is covered up by a thin veil of vampire-run conspiracy known as the Masquerade.
Dude, you can't mention the Masquerade. That's a punch card right there.
I think you get a free pizza pie after you fill out your punch card. I'm pretty sure that's established. Several factions of vampires, or kindred as they like to call themselves in the world of darkness, compete for control and influence in an eternal struggle. While the humans, or kine as they are referred to by vampires.
It's kin, they just stick an E at the end to be edgy.
Well, because they've done this, I pronounce this word kine.
Everything sounds a little spookier with that silent E added on the end, doesn't it?
Kine,
Kin,
as they are referred to by vampires, remain largely oblivious and just sort of live out their lives like worker ants.
the Camarilla
Camarilla.
are an aristocratic and powerful group of ancient kindred clans who believe in abiding by laws that allow them to coexist with humanity. They function sort of like a supernatural pyramid scheme, with elder vampires at the top controlling who can sire, what territories can be used for feeding, and so on. Camarilla prefer to stick to making shadow plays in world government, media, and economies so that humans don't find out about vampires and hunt down every last one of them until they are all dead. Again.
Opposing the
Camarilla
are the Sabbat, who believe in worldwide vampire dominance and are made up of a large number of loosely affiliated clans that don't give two shits about the Masquerade. Much of the Camarilla's efforts go into triaging the Sabbat and performing damage control for their actions.
Caught somewhere in the middle are the Anarchs, a small but fierce group of independent kindred that don't believe in the power dynamics of the Camarilla. They generally respect the rules of the Masquerade as common sense, but refuse to bend the knee to Camarilla elders.
At the opening of the game, Los Angeles is currently undergoing a power struggle between these three factions, due to a Camarilla prince moving in and declaring Los Angeles as Camarilla territory, despite the fact that Anarch barons and a group of mystical Chinese undead called the Kuai-Jin have already been bleeding over it for decades. To complicate things further, a mysterious artifact known as the Ankaran sarcophagus is reported to be coming into port. This moldy coffin is rumored to contain an antediluvian, an ancient and powerful kindred. Anyone munching on its blood would be able to take this power for themselves, so... Yeah, the antediluvians are also sleeping until the vampire apocalypse, so they're gonna wake up and they're gonna eat all of their children.
Can't wait for that. The Camarilla Prince of Los Angeles, Sebastian LaCroix, sees you as a useful and disposable tool in this regard, specifically due to your lack of faction affiliation. Your primary task will be tracking down and obtaining the sarcophagus, and you'll be chasing it all around the City of Angels, remaining just a step or two behind as you find out the coffin is in yet another crypt. Along the way, you'll be meeting the city's many denizens, both dead and undead. I should have put alive in there probably too.
Also, some are alive.
Along the way, you'll be meeting the city's many denizens, both live and undead, gaining their favor or drawing their anger over the course of your bloody quest.
Bloodlines' final chapters culminate in one of several endings that can be influenced by your actions throughout the Chronicles. That's right, you are in control, vampire! These endings differ only marginally from one another until the credits play you out with some time frame appropriate new metal. But still, the path taken to get there can change dramatically based on your character's clan and abilities, which provides a fairly wide range of replayability by design.
Troika looked long and hard into the Vampire the Masquerade tabletop system, and these rules seemed more oriented towards tales of political intrigue and skillful manipulation, with combat taking more of a back seat.
Boring. More stab, please.
A valiant effort has been made to streamline the disciplines and skills into a manageable number for an action RPG, and you can choose to start your nocturnal journey with a charmingly old-school quiz, or by jumping straight into a stat screen.
I love a personality quiz, yeah. Physical attributes trickle down into learnable skills within this hybrid system, with each holding a value of 1 through 5. The unofficial patch also restores optional background descriptions that can further alter the character's leveling priorities and even certain interactions. Combat skills directly affect your wannabe Lestat's proficiencies with weapons and defense, but pushing points into non-combat skills can help you unlock doors and computers or unlock new dialogue options, all depending on your preferences.
On top of all this, each clan has a host of specific abilities called disciplines that can be called on during gameplay by spending some of the precious red stuff. These are sort of like magic spells and can gain additional effects and powers as your fledgling Fanghead advances.
Each of the 7 clans plays totally differently and levels up their skills and attributes with different priority. Bash your way through town as combat-centric Bruja Bruiser, enter hard mode by sticking to shadows as the monstrous Nosferatu, or crank up the weird factor with unpredictable Malkavian mind powers.
You can pretty much hear the voice actors rolling their eyes every time they deal with your Malkav, because you're the wacky one. And I think that's awesome.
I feel like it maybe turns mental illness into an unfortunate cartoon a little bit.
Heard anything? Kind of musky. Did you hear the one about the tuna and the chef?
So like as a comedic writing vehicle, it's very good. But I understand that it is obviously satire. Maybe it doesn't have wokeness.
Yeah.
You know?
No matter how you build your modern day monster, many of your battles will be fought with words. Fortunately, dialogue in Bloodlines is one of the finest parts of the game. Every single citizen is face animated and fully voiced, thanks to the capabilities of the source engine, and the dialogue itself is usually a treat. Writer Brian Mitsoda took special care in crafting characters within gritty Y2K LA, and it shows. Even minor characters have memorable mannerisms and interactions, and the voice quality is exceedingly good, minus a couple of pull the janitor into the sound booth moments like this.
Now who the hell are you? You involved in all this?
It's hard not to talk about all our favorites without spoiling the moments outright, but damn, there's some straight up gems. Of course, there's the aforementioned gruff biker grandpa, Smiling Jack.
I'm waiting on you, princess.
But we also have the likes of the wonderfully Midwestern officer Chunk,
Something burning? Ooh, smells like someone burnt the burgers.
the manic pixie dream goth Jeanette Vorman,
I'm the finger down your spine when all the lights are out.
the gunrunner Fat Larry who beautifully channels a strip mall Biggie Smalls,
The ladies call me, oh God, but you can call me Fat Larry with a F-A-T, cause I know I got a weight problem, I just don't give a fuck.
and this stop sign. The background characters like the sex workers, rich guys, and cops also have some quality barks, and the bums are inexplicably obsessed with
Crab nibble, listen, crab nibble, hold on, crab nibble.
Bloodlines is open enough to allow for multiple approaches in many of its gritty environments. A variety of routes through all the hub worlds was needed in order to support the different playstyles. For example, Nosferatu can't pass as a human, and they always need a vent or a sewer egress, or at least some shadows to hide in.
Rather than a single open world, Bloodlines is built around a series of hubs, a chain of linked dioramas, and although these little microcosms of Los Angeles get decidedly smaller in the second half of the game, it's no less pleasurable to poke around through each and every alley. A lot of missions have multiple paths to victory, and shortcuts open up based on the skills at your disposal.
Bloodlines also places a ton of special areas in your path for the sarcophagus. These are best described as dungeons.
The dungeons. I see a dungeon, I say a dungeon.
Each of these are required in order to progress in your quest for the accursed coffin. Some of these are non-linear and a blast to play as your bloodsucker stalks through, twisting necks and trading buckshot with the hordes of enemies lurking in the hallways. The ImSim design philosophy is heavily reflected in the best of these, such as the Sabat Warehouse or the Museum.
Immersive simulation.
Other dungeons are more like a trip through a haunted house. Very linear and none too difficult, but dripping with atmosphere and storytelling. Oceanside Hotel is the most infamous of these, mentioned in many a Bloodlines review. This level probably inspired 1,000 of those Unity indie horror projects that currently infest Steam like a bloodborne pathogen. Oceanside is an abandoned lodge filled with old-timey ghosts and dangerous poltergeists, and comes complete with all the trappings of early 2000s horror. You got your jump scares, you got your creepy kid drawings, you got your diary entries that are inexplicably written as the author is being murdered. It checks all the cheesy haunted house boxes, and all in all, it's a pretty good little stroll down spooky trope lane.
Later dungeons lean on the game's combat a little too heavily, feeling largely like twisting hallways full of hastily placed bad dudes. These areas expose the game's issues like worms and freshly turned grave dirt, and are generally more of a chore than a good time, especially if your kindred leans a little more towards the diplomatic side.
There's also some more, let's say, mechanical issues that come along with exploring the grimy underworld of LA. When you start moving around for the first time, you'll probably notice it's a little weird. There's no sprint button, of course. This is a 2004 game, so like it or not, you're stuck at a leisurely jog. On the plus side, your character is fully modeled rather than being just a camera with a gun stuck to it, due to the first and third person viewpoints that are swappable at any time outside of conversations. It feels like movement retains some momentum because of this. Running around corners or strafing sometimes feels a little bit slippery, a little bit greaseful, like piloting a boat or maybe a barge, and some of these problems compound with the game's combat.
Fighting in Bloodlines is not so good. Switching to a melee weapon pops you into third person, but this ain't no Dark Souls. Blocking is, well, inconsistent. You can switch up your attacks by holding a direction, but this feels a little imprecise, and enemies can easily interrupt or stagger your attacks. Still, close combat requires no ammunition and will likely be a part of your playthrough no matter what.
Firearms are an option, but they're really more of a lateral move. Bloodlines uses the same goofy aiming system as Deus Ex, where your crosshair widens while moving around or unholstering and takes several seconds to zero back in. There's no aim down sights, and the camera recoil is maddening on many of the weapons. It's a shame that Bloodlines is such a poor shooter, honestly. There's a wealth of firearms, but half of them have a major downside that makes them awkward and ineffective to use.
The Ingram has some of the wildest camera recoil I've ever seen, making it nearly unusable. The Ithaca shotgun is probably the most effective early game gun due to its knockback and effectiveness against vampire kind, but it has a small magazine and a glacial reload speed. Plus, firearms all have some burpy low quality sound effects, making them largely unsatisfying to shoot.
So can you go quiet? Sometimes. The stealth can be spotty, with enemies detecting your approach through objects and barriers on occasion, and at other times letting you walk right up to them without a care in the world. The stealth insta-kills are pretty satisfying, and approaching Bloodlines as a sneaking game is a fun way to play. Unfortunately, there's enough forced combat segments that even invisibility powers can't protect you from, and solid snaking your way through the denser areas is not always possible.
The disciplines are the saving grace here despite their heavy blood cost. Depending on your clan, you can cause powerful delusions, devastate with blood magic, or command supernatural speed and strength. A combination of these power-ups along with the weapon complement will be needed to survive the legions of men and monsters that the game throws your way.
There's a good amount of enemy variety. The lowly gangsters and foot soldiers are quickly supplemented by all manner of kindred, each with their own blood disciplines. Before long, you'll be battling all manner of zombies and Cronenbergian flesh abominations, and the late game is filled with tough vampire hunters and tougher Sabbat that are ready to cut your night short.
Forever.
Vampire opponents might be tough, but they die real good, exploding into heat and flame before their dusty skeletons disappear into the wind. Satisfying.
Many of these combat sections also culminate into boss battles, which mostly take place in big open arenas. The differences in these are largely surface level with a few exceptions. The optional gargoyle fight is particularly good, pitting players against a 12-foot stone behemoth with little more than a sledgehammer, fighting to survive as the beast rampages in the lobby in a Chinese theater, which gets wholly destroyed by the end of the battle. The sniper battle against a formidable vampire hunter is also a memorable one, funneling players closer from cover to cover as he blows holes through the furniture with a higher-powered rifle. Even when the boss fights are lackluster, many of the boss designs are quite fun to see, like this big fish guy. Look at this big fish guy here.
Everything taken into account, combat can be serviceable, and in rare moments it feels good. Bloodlines might have been better served if it tried to be more of an adventure game and less of an action RPG, and it often feels like the game grinds to a halt when you're stuck inside a combat area. If a particular combat-heavy section becomes too frustrating, you can always fall back on the extensive save system and
Save scum!
Or pop on some cheats in the developer console. Knowing me, that's probably how I made it past that fucking werewolf.
Quest designs are largely looped into conversations, and even though a lot of tasks boil down to fetch quests and hit jobs, the game does a great job with the NPCs. Quest givers don't feel like mission dispensing vending machines. Far from it, they often have their own agendas and talk like real people, for the most part. Figuring out what makes them tick is part of the fun, even when the right answers are the obvious ones. Some major side quests are grand departures that have long-running arcs and multiple outcomes, like the hunt for a serial killer or the recruitment of your very own ghoul friend.
Aww. As far as puzzles go, there's plenty of your standard switch combo and key hunt type deals, which can sometimes be bypassed entirely with the application of lockpicking or hacking. One of my personal favorites was a puzzle involving the assassination of a vampire hunter, who was hiding undercover as a peep show dancer. This involves figuring out ways to trick each of the patrons into leaving their booths so that you can remove your target quietly.
Quests, puzzles, exploration, fighting, all of this is encapsulated within the framework of the Masquerade, which itself has several moving parts. First, there's a police and crime mechanic. When detected doing something illegal, like assaulting a citizen, breaking and entering, or otherwise violating human law, the cops will come out of nowhere to shoot you to pieces, just like real cops. Hiding out in an out-of-the-way place like your apartment or the sewer tunnels will cause them to give up the chase after a few minutes,
just like real cops,
giving Bloodlines a bit of a Metal Gear Solid alarm mechanic.
The Masquerade mechanic forms a secondary layer. In certain zones where the Masquerade is enforced, indicated by this icon over here, breaking the fragile facade by using one of the flashier disciplines, or sucking on rats, or otherwise revealing your true bestial nature is penalized by the loss of a Masquerade point, also known as demerits.
This also ties itself to a kindred's humanity level. You're gonna need a lot of blood in your pursuit of this moldy old coffin of change, and getting it can be problematic. Feeding needs to be done in out-of-the-way places or in disguised context, and blood bags are best used for a last resort top-up in an otherwise lethal situation. Sounds a little weird now that you're on the other side of the grave, but losing your humanity brings your toothy troublemaker ever closer to losing control of the beast within.
Butchering civilians, fully draining your victims, and other acts of savagery will lower your humanity level, while acts of compassion and kindness can restore it. When hungry or overly damaged, your bloodthirsty fanghead will lose control and go on a rampage for a short time until your thirst is quenched. This usually means bad news for raging kindred, since a vampire that succumbs to the beast within is likely to violate both human and vampire law in desperation.
Losing all 5 Masquerade points results in vampire hunters tracking you down to stomp your ass into dust, and it's definitely a game over situation. However, like humanity, Masquerade points can also be redeemed by completing certain quests or choosing certain event outcomes. All 3 of these mechanics work surprisingly well together as a rudimentary way to keep the gameplay reined in and challenging, even if they feel a little arbitrary in video games.
Bloodlines is one of those games that still looks good several generations after release. It's drenched head to toe in grimy neon style while still retaining a modicum of that early 7th gen realism. You've got your standard issue shiny wood, water reflections, spooky particles. Environmental designs do a good job of putting the goth industrial filter over the City of Angels, and each area pulls off a strikingly different look while still maintaining this overall theme. The unofficial patch also does a little something more to address the outdated textures and models. Look at this graffiti. Look at all this lovingly rendered trash.
That is one gorgeous garbage can. Unfortunately, the illusion is broken a bit by character animations, which never seem quite right. You can tell the devs paid some extra special attention to the female walk cycles, and there's enough jiggle physics to make Dead or Alive blush. Attack animations with the iffy physics make for some floaty feeling melee combat especially, but contrasting this is the lip sync animations during each and every conversation that do wonders to improve the immersion when talking to the game's offbeat characters.
As mentioned before, the voiceover is mostly high quality, on par with the writing, so there's no reason to mention it here other than to wedge another unrelated clip into this part of the video.
Just tell me what makes your bits tingle, Jack. I'll set you right up.
The same can't be said for the sound effects, but outside of the stinky gunplay noises, the rest of the sound ranges from passable to good.
Environmental effects are especially good, and once again, it's the little touches. TV news plays the Kin's take on recent events and hints at what is yet to come. Muffled bass frequencies outside the dive bars, rat conversations echoing in the sewers, idle conversations between guards.
You heard something.
Like what?
Like, I don't know, but keep your fucking eyes open.
All of it speaks deeper into Bloodlines' black lipstick veneer.
The soundtrack follows suit, of course, despite some unevenness. The menu theme perfectly captures the mood of mystique and blood while cribbing riffs from Massive Attack. In contrast, the combat music sounds like it was rejected from The Matrix. Like this guy's outfit.
He's gonna show up at the next vampire convention. He's gonna be so embarrassed. The original music tracks take a backseat to the original tracks from notable goth industrial acts like Lacuna Coil, Genitorturers, and Ministry, and it was even sold as a promo tie-in by Best Buy in anticipation of the game's release. Real-world bands lending their talent to the game's various nightclubs and bars gives Bloodlines more believability and helps blur the lines of its conspiratorial world and our mundane reality. That's what video games are all about, right?
Bloodlines retains its longevity because it illustrates a point that most modern games miss entirely.
That's usually the way the story goes.
Big open worlds become unnecessary when you can pack a few city blocks with interesting choices to make, people to meet, and secrets to uncover. In this way, Bloodlines feels more alive and unique than a great many larger games that subscribe to the trendy box-ticking school of open world design.
White Wolf's World of Darkness seems like a fertile ground for video games to take root. It's a bit of a puzzle as to why we haven't seen more high-profile offerings that take place within the rich lore of its modern Gothic setting. So where will the Masquerade go from here? Since Paradox Interactive picked up White Wolf's properties in 2015, we're likely to see more and more Bloodsucker-friendly titles creeping their way onto our screens. Bloodlines 2 was teased back in 2019. Unfortunately, more recent reports state that the sequel is currently deep asleep in its own coffin, and may or may not awaken from development limbo. But that doesn't mean we'll be totally bereft of bloodsucking chronicles set within this rich universe.
Vampire the Masquerade Blood Hunt recently released in April of 2022, which is basically Vampire Fortnite. Kind of a puzzling choice for a world steeped in subterfuge and political intrigue. Swan Song, a promising adventure that released to disappointing reviews, dropped this year as well. There's already enough Vampire the Masquerade visual novels to fill a library. Still, not one of these games really takes its shot at dethroning Bloodlines. This cult classic still stands tall as a one-of-a-kind, genre-bending adventure, and still the most memorable video game ever to take place in the World of Darkness universe.
Well, that about wraps it up for today. So what are your favorite memories of Bloodlines? Which one of its colorful characters stands out most in your mind? Let us know down in the comments.
Thanks for watching, and please touch all the buttons that we have, and we will see you on the next
Two-Headed Hero!
Did you hear the one about the tuna and the chef? A tuna walks into a sushi restaurant, says to the chef, "Hey, you killed my father." Chef says to the tuna, "That's my business, fish." Tuna thinks about it, says, "Then I challenge you to a game of chess. If I win, you stop being a chef forever. And if I win," asks the chef, "you can feed me to your customers." Tuna replies. So the chef and Tuna play chess. Tunas love to play chess, so in a few moves, the chef was checkmated. "Well, looks like I win," says the tuna. Chef nods and plunges his knife into the fish's belly. "But I won," says the tuna, as he feels the knife wiggling into his guts. "So did your father," says the chef. Good night, and have a pleasant evening.